In this presentation, I will examine the Greek support for the passage, the commentary by various theologians, and the internal evidence of the disputed passage. Greek support. The Comma Ioanneum is supported by 11 Greek manuscripts, 6 of which were corrected by a second hand to add the verse.
Okay, so that's a little bit higher than I've seen, but the point is over half of them, it is a later, sometimes even an 18th century hand written in the margin. Textually irrelevant. Textually irrelevant. It just needs to be said.
As discussed earlier, there are 0 extant papyri manuscripts containing 1 John 5, and of the near 6,000 extant manuscripts we do have, just under 500 contain any part of 1 John at all.
Okay. Now keep in mind, even though he's not going to mention this, none of those that contain 1 John for the first 1,400 years of church history contain this reading. Positively. Now he's going to argue, well, they only contain primarily the first part of the book. Maybe they contained it. Again, notice the difference between doing textual criticism, where you actually have to bring forth evidence of something, and the defense of a traditional text where you can go, well, it might have been this, might have been that. We don't know. Could have been. Don't know. That's why I say, we don't know, I don't know, is not an apologetic methodology either, and is fundamentally destructive of an apologetic methodology.
It is important to note that though the majority of these extant witnesses do not contain the disputed verse, the majority of these extant manuscripts also exclude all of the verses past chapter 2 of the epistle. So it's slightly misleading to say that most of the manuscripts exclude this passage.
Okay, so again, this is not textual criticism. This is theologizing, this is traditionalism, but it's not text criticism. The assertion is being made. It's a positive assertion that goes against all the ancient documentation. Therefore, it requires positive evidence. You can't just simply go, oh, it might have been. If you find that to be compelling, then one of two things is true. Either you've already made up your mind and you want to be TR only or something like that, or you've never done textual criticism before. You've never looked at any other variant. You've never tried to defend. Over the years, we have looked at numerous passages here on the program and defended New Testament readings from criticisms from Muslims or atheists or others. You have to have a consistent historical basis. Going, might have been there, is not enough. That is destructive to apologetics. That's why we're addressing this, and we'll continue to address this. It's vitally important.
This does not mean that there were only ever 11 manuscripts throughout the history of the New Testament copying that contain the passage. It simply means that 11 have survived.
So what's the assumption? Well, there may have been more. Could have been more. There could have been thousands more. They just haven't come down to us. It just so happens that the ones that have come down to us don't contain it, but there may have been lots of others. Again, notice the actual reasoning here. You're starting with your conclusion, and then you're trying to backfill from there. This would not survive meaningful cross-examination. It would not survive in a textual critical classroom. At least I hope it wouldn't. This is reasoning backwards. Sounds good to someone who doesn't do textual criticism, doesn't actually take this out there and defend it. It sounds good. But once you stop and go, you're sort of assuming your conclusion, aren't you? Yeah, that's exactly right. You are.
This is perfectly reasonable, as hand copying of manuscripts was largely discontinued after the printing press. And
I did find that somewhat humorous for one reason. Where are the majority of manuscripts that actually contain the comma? They're written after the printing press. They're inserted, probably from a printed text, which means that 11 number is actually like 4. Meaningful. That those are the ones we looked at before, where it's actually a part of the text and not written in the margin and not written in a hand from 200-300 years down the road.
Is prone to destruction by just about everything. In the last 200 years, the theory that the oldest surviving manuscripts were the best without question has held its place as the chief principle of textual criticism.
No, it's never been the chief principle. It is an important principle because of a simple reality, and that is a manuscript written in 200 has to have fewer generations of copying between the original and it than the same type of manuscript written in the year 1200. So it is highly improbable that a manuscript written in 1200 is a copy of a manuscript that was written in the year 200. We have a couple that are. 1881, 1739 come to mind as 9th and 10th century minuscules that we can tell were copying 3rd or 4th century texts, maybe even 2nd century texts. But they are the rarity, they are the exception, not the rule. So yes, it is pretty obvious to most people that a copy of the Gospel of John, such as P75, which is written around the year 200 by a very careful scribe who wrote one letter at a time, that has further evidence of the antiquity of its readings in Codex Vaticanus from a separate line that greatly enhances its value, is to be given more weight than a 12th century minuscule manuscript. Yes, that is logical. That is preeminently logical. I don't know how someone can not see that. And if you can't, then you have to ask yourselves the question, why? What's standing in your way?
The restructuring of these principles has inserted doubt into the theory, and it may be wise to surrender the argument on the available data. These late manuscripts that contain the comma could have easily been copied from a manuscript of great quality and antiquity.
Again, a necessary assumption provided without evidence. Show it, to my knowledge, and again, we only have 4 manuscripts. The ones that's in the column, that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant. To my knowledge, there is nothing found in any... Monfortianus is a throwaway. It's not textually relevant. I've never seen anyone go, wow, Monfortianus has all these amazing early Byzantine readings and all the... I've never seen anyone make an argument that any of those manuscripts have any claim whatsoever to the kind of weight that's been given to 1881 and 1739. And without the provision of evidence of that, then what you have here is wishful thinking, not solid argumentation. Just wishful thinking. They may have been, could have been, who knows? Well, if, again, you're the one making the argument, you have to provide solid foundation for that. I've given you 2 manuscripts, 1881 and 1739. There are numerous scholarly articles that analyze these manuscripts and demonstrate that they were copying an early exemplar, and we can tell why, because they differ from their contemporaries. Where do these manuscripts differ from their contemporaries, other than the comma? I mean, Monfortianus is an entire manuscript. It's not just 1 John. But its readings are all common. When? Around 1520. Around 1520. That's where it came from. It's not the copy of some ancient manuscript. There's no evidence for it.
There's plenty of evidence by the way of theologians throughout the ages that testify these great number of manuscripts contain a great number of manuscripts contain this passage.
Okay, now let's stop right there. Theologians. Well, we can have great respect for theologians, but I know a number of theologians that to be honest with you, if you opened this up to many of the theologians I know and asked them to interpret the notes at the bottom of the page, they would have no idea what they were looking at. It's just not something they do. And until you have this level of information available to you, we look at Jerome, and man, Jerome is a gold mine of information about manuscripts in one particular area at one particular time. But he only had access to that particular area, and he was probably the most important person at that time. Origen was so weird, who knows? But he's important too. But the point is, you couldn't call up your friend 1,000 miles away and ask for a fax. Hey, could you do a screen capture of that for me? PDF that for me? Couldn't do it. So any commentary up until the modern period about the manuscript tradition as a whole is extremely fragmentary. Extremely fragmentary. So the idea that because someone was a great theologian, they somehow knew what all the manuscripts across Europe meant or contained, nobody did. No one had that information. So any statement about how many manuscripts or how widely distributed, anything like that, up until at least the last century, and really the middle of the last century, are just simply wild guesses. There's nothing more to be given to them than that. I mean, that's just recognizing the limitations of what had yet been done in the creation of a critical text at that point.
I have already demonstrated that Calvin, and in other presentations that Turretin and John Owen agreed to this. Francis Chanel of St. John's College in Oxford said this in the 17th century, quote, "These words in 1 John 5:7 are to be found in copies of great antiquity and best credit," end quote.
Now, it's interesting. Great antiquity. Back to when? What did he have access to? Which manuscripts did he have access to? They don't know. They can't say. But they want to say, well, he must have stuff that we don't have now. And he must have known that it was from antiquity. How did he date them? Paleography is a rather modern invention. It requires access to a large number of manuscripts. It's been greatly enhanced by our discovery of the papyri, for example. So how does he know? There were a lot of people. Erasmus was known to refer to manuscripts in antiquity that were from like the 1200s. That's not antiquity, at least not from our perspective. So you get one guy someplace with no manuscript evidence, and that's supposed to be a sufficient grounds for the insertion of a reading into Holy Scripture. Think about that, folks. Think about what the foundation of this really is, what's really being said.
Further, in Codex Vaticanus, there are 3 dots left by the scribe at 1 John 5:6-8 that indicate the scribe knew of a textual variant. This is available publicly on the internet for all to see. Go and look at the manuscript. That means that this text was disputed as early as the 4th century, which is coincidentally when many other passages were being omitted from specifically Alexandrian manuscripts.
Now, 2 things. We showed that earlier on. I mentioned we don't know what the dating of these dots is because of the nature of Vaticanus and the fact that it was overwritten and things like that. But let's say it was then. That means Vaticanus is as old as we've always said that it was. But B, I hope you caught what was just being said. All these texts were being deleted from the Alexandrian manuscripts. Now they have to believe that. Because the Textus Receptus is at least 1% longer than the corresponding, what would in the past be called Alexandrian version of the same thing. And so from their perspective, people were successfully deleting material. Well, not successfully because they end up being in the Byzantine manuscripts. But this is the exception. So the idea being that somehow, well, man, I need to repent because Dan Brown got it right. Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code, got it right. Here's Taylor DeSoto telling us that Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code, got it right. That somehow at that time period, because that's the same time as Constantine, the whole thing for Dan Brown was that Constantine gathered up the manuscripts and made changes. And did it so well that we never found out about it. I've always said that was absolute fiction, that it was absurd. Well, it is fiction, and it is absurd. And the idea that this text was in manuscripts and then deleted from those manuscripts successfully from the entire Greek manuscript tradition, that not a single one of all those manuscripts had one copy that managed to make it down through history, is absurd. But folks, you need to see the radical nature. These guys don't look radical. They sound as conservative as the day is long, but you need to understand that when you apply the principles outside of the Comma Johannium that they are defending, it results in the radical deconstruction of the entire foundation of the New Testament itself. Because they don't use this argumentation anywhere else. They use a completely different set to defend Revelation 16:5, a different set Revelation 14:1, Ephesians 3, et cetera. They use all sorts of different arguments. They're never consistent with themselves. They can't be. But this argument means that we have zero confidence outside of restoring texts from foreign language translations that the Greek manuscript tradition actually represents what was written by John or Paul or Peter or anybody else. That you heard it. You heard it.
If anything, the exclusion of the passage from the manuscript tradition is evidence that the passage was contested early on in the transmission process, not that it was absent to begin with.
So you begin with your conclusion, and now you're saying, well, the fact that it's not there shows that it was disputed. See, there's no reasoning with this. You've started with your conclusion, and then whatever evidence you encounter, you then fit it into what your conclusion requires it to be. So if we don't find manuscripts, if we don't find it in Vaticanus, we don't find it in Sinaiticus, that means that it was disputed and that there was a reason for its being excluded, and that means it was there originally, which can be done with any text. Any text whatsoever. There are some quotes from Clement of Alexandria. We have no idea what Clement of Alexandria is talking about when he actually sounds like he's quoting from Scripture. What if you're dealing with someone who grabs hold of some of his stuff and says, this was original too, and it has just as much evidence as the Comma Johannium? These guys got no response. I do. Because of coherence, consistency.
I have called into question and demonstrated the lack of integrity of those manuscripts formerly belonging to the Alexandrian family on my channel before, so it should not be surprising that they would contain such an omission.
And all the Byzantine manuscripts, and all the Western manuscripts, all Greek manuscripts, all Greek manuscripts. The Alexandrian has nothing to do with this. It's all the Greek manuscripts. In fact, it is obvious that the 4 Greek manuscripts that contain it in the text do so because of Latin contamination. One of them's a polyglot. It's got the Latin right there. That's where it came from. It's obvious that's where it came from, is from the Latin in every single one of them, due to the predominance of the Latin Vulgate in the West. There is no evidence of an antiquity in the manuscript to this reading at all, in any family. But you'll notice the assumptions that are constantly put in to what is supposed to be a positive presentation.
Let's look at internal support. Though many modern commentaries dismiss the disputed verse as being incoherent, theologians for centuries have found the passage fits most comfortably at verse 7. Remember Calvin, who said, quote, "Since, however, the passage flows better when this cause is added, and as I see that it is found in the best and most approved copies, I am inclined to receive it as the true reading," end quote.
And Calvin was wrong about that. He was not only wrong about it flowing, but he was wrong about the copies. And living at the time he was living at, given the amount of information he had, even if he had the 1550 Stephanus, there are places where Stephanus wasn't exactly spot on. So the introduction of the doctrine of the Trinity at this point, when you're talking about the Spirit, the water, and the blood, which are probably references to the humanity of Christ, to the nature of Christ at that point. I mean, I'm not saying that we can't find it someplace. We can't find it someplace. It's just the idea of defending a reading that has no basis before the 14th or 15th centuries on the basis of smoothness is incredibly weak. Incredibly weak.
Calvin knew Greek better than, I would say, any scholar alive today.
I would not say that at all, and Calvin never said it. I think that's ridiculous. He certainly knew Latin very well, but pretty much everybody did. But I see absolutely no reason, for all the respect that I have and how many hours I've spent defending John Calvin, even to the point of defending his pastoral ministry and things like that, I would never, ever say what was just said there.
The verse indeed seems to be required to fit the flow of the passage. Not only is it parallel to quote, these three bear witness on earth, end quote, which is a common pattern for the apostle, there are syntactical ramifications if the passage is not authentic. R.L. Dabney notes the article in verse 8 has no antecedent without verse 7, as you would expect.
And anyone who has taught Greek and taught through 1 John knows that trying to demand that John utilize that level of provision of clear antecedents is absurd. The whole argument about 1 John 5:20, there are just so many places where the antecedent is not expressed or is allowed to remain ambiguous in John that it's again, an extremely weak argument.
Structure of the sentence. In the 4th century, Gregory of Nazianzus comments that the passage is confused in its grammar without the phrase that we now know as verse 7. In that, after using 3 masculine gendered words, he follows with 3 neuter words, which is, quote, contrary to the definitions and laws which you have and your grammarians have laid down, end quote.
Which could then be charged against John in other places and Paul in other places as well. Again, this kind of, it would just be so much smoother if it was there. Let's not worry about the manuscript's argumentation. There you go.
A 4th century bishop. Dabney agrees with Gregory's analysis. Given the parallel structure which is common to John and the strange grammar construction without verse 7, it seems unlikely that the passage was originally penned from verse 6 to 8, omitting verse 7. Conclusion. The Comma Ioanneum has been one of the most widely contested passages in the history of the
Okay, there was the entire positive presentation. That was all of it. I played it. And what it was we're going to assume it was there and then try to get around the evidence that it wasn't. That's all it was. And if I can demonstrate that, then atheists and skeptics and Muslims can do the exact same thing. And to be honest with you, should do the exact same thing. Should do the exact same thing. So I utilized, well, let's just finish it up.
Of the New Testament, alongside with the ending of Mark and the pericope adulterae. Given that many of the claims regarding the phrase can be demonstrated to be false, it should be considered way more carefully than it is currently. It is important to note that throughout the transmission of the text of the New Testament, heresies and theological controversies have indeed resulted in contest and debate over which passages truly belong in the Scripture, and in some cases, those scriptures being removed.
Did you catch that? Been removed. By whom, how, when, and where? And are you seriously saying, because it's the only way to understand your position, that in this instance, they succeeded? They succeeded. I mean, that is a radical position of skepticism for the New Testament. Radical. Which would then require the radical theological reestablishment of the text, which is really what you have. Fundamentally, if you're going to say this and this alone, doesn't matter what the manuscripts say, all the rest of that stuff, I think you should just be straight up front and say, God re-inspired this. This is our standard. It was done in 1633. If you want to really use this, go with Trinitarian Bible Society. It was done, what was it, 1880s period. And that's it. And stop saying that you're making a historical argument, because you're not making a historical argument. You're saying it was corrupted, was lost, it's been found, it's been restored, and here's how. And here's how it worked out.